warned, while there are no spoilers for Spider-Man Far From Home in this video, there are very casual Avengers Endgame spoilers, so maybe don't watch if you haven't seen that movie yet. As if the entire planet hadn't already seen it multiple times by now. And so we end Marvel's third phase of films with this released at the halfway point of the year, so that Marvel can give people a chance to miss them for the latter half of 2019. After the massive blowout that was Endgame, Far From Home's mission statement seemed to be winding down the MCU as we know it with a smaller movie about where the ground level of the universe is after all that's gone on. But how do I feel about it? Where does it rank in my already somewhat unorthodox Spidey film pantheon? I have no idea. Honestly, I'm genuinely not sure where I would rank this movie having only just seen it the once. Let me just say, I think this is officially the movie that's put me off seeking out reactions by those who see films before I do. He said, knowing this pattern of behavior would doubtless continue as soon as the next big thing comes around. I try hard not to talk too much about other people's reactions to the movies I watch. I try to pepper it into my reviews where I think it's appropriate just because I think it's fun and informative to position my views in a wider discourse. But it can often lead to me going down a rabbit hole of touching on other people's thoughts that I don't necessarily share, and that's annoying because it leads to me wasting my voice on minutes of audio that I won't use because it's ultimately a tangent. Here though, it's inescapable. I heard a lot of mixed reactions from people I follow closely going into this movie, and it colored my experience in a way that usually doesn't tend to happen. I can't help it. When you have people whose opinion you respect coming out of this movie saying things like it felt like a kick to the face or made them sick, you're naturally going to spend a lot of your first viewing saying, oh, so that's why they reacted so badly. Okay, I get it. More than you do actually sitting with the movie and formulating your own authentic feelings about it. So let me just adjust some expectations here, spoiler-free, so you don't spend the movie like I did. Namely, if you were expecting or hoping for Far From Home to be the movie that toned down the goofy comedy from the first film, or to be the one that feels less driven by relation to Tony Stark because that character is finally out of the picture, or for this movie to be the one that delved into the more emotional angle of Peter's relationship with his surrogate parents, this isn't the one for you. This is still very much in line with Homecoming as far as Peter's arc being defined alternatively by the legacy of Tony Stark and his link to the broader MCU as a whole, and personal stakes adjacent to that which are very much the kind of thing that would feel like life or death to a teen but like paltry nothing to anyone significantly older. Aunt May is still mostly an effectual comedic relief, the jokes are actually plussed from Homecoming to the point of being obnoxious in places, and all of it is largely underlined by a killer villain performance and an expectedly compelling turn from Holland himself as Peter. On the note of the comedy, a lot of it works, but this movie, more than almost any other Marvel film, needed to tone it down big time. In particular, the gags with Peter's teachers were overdone, and there's an extended bit in the third act that I'd have just cut. Almost everything got a big laugh from the rest of my audience, but personally I could feel myself starting to be worn thin in some bits. Like, even in a movie that's nominally a romantic comedy half the time, I think it's okay for it to take itself a little bit more seriously than it does. Keeping with the stuff that one could consider complaints, there's a decent point to be made. I think that the whole European vacation setup is kinda pointless. Outside of maybe some comparatively little things related to villain motivation and minor plot points, there's no reason the bulk of this movie couldn't have taken place in New York. Not really something that bothers me, but once again a little thing I can't help but think about as far as utility. Like, what could have maybe been done with the screen time we use here on moving between locations, setting up mechanics for that movement, etc., when the locations themselves seem largely incidental. Ditto Brad. Brad is a total waste of screen time with no real reason for being outside of more gags and the ghost of an attempt at romantic tension. Although, if I can swing around back to the positives, the romance itself is really nice. Look, I can't help it, Peter and MJ are just so goddamn adorable! A lot of people were dismissive of Zendaya's rendition of MJ after her less than 3 minutes of screen time in the previous film, though quite frankly I was just impressed that her character left such an impression in such little time. Here she's a much greater presence and gets to come across much less abrasive and much more open, charming, and vulnerable. Jacob Batalon and Guri Rice have a fun little beta couple thing going on as Ned and Betty, Tony Revolori's take on Flash Thompson continues to be interesting, and Jon Favreau's Happy Hogan is as strong a supporting character as ever, with his and Peter's dynamic continuing from where it left off in Homecoming and making for some surprisingly touching moments. There's not much I can say about Nick Fury or Maria Hill in this film that hasn't already been revealed in trailers without going into spoilers, but Needless to say, they're both characters to keep an eye on during repeat viewings. The same generally holds true for Mysterio, naturally, but I'm gonna try and work around that anyway, because why am I even making this review if I'm not gonna talk about the biggest new element of it with some depth? I think the biggest compliment I can pay this movie is that it gave me everything I wanted as far as the Spider-Man and Mysterio conflict. Said conflict revolves all around the appearance of grandeur, what with the globe-trotting and the elemental monster fighting, but the motivations and actual mechanics involved keep it feeling like a decidedly Spider-Man-y conflict in terms of what is and isn't actually at stake. Plus, goes without saying, Gyllenhaal is so good it hurts. The thing is, everyone was looking forward to his performance, and rightly so. Without giving anything away, the way Gyllenhaal plays Quentin Beck is almost split in half. And while one could argue that he's almost weirdly off his game during the half where he's a straight-laced Steve Rogers-esque heroic paragon, it's all in service of and retroactively enhanced by the other half where he's a super manic, self-involved weirdo more in line with Gyllenhaal's other well-known performances, with the almost immediate switch that Jake is capable of making between the two being particularly impressive. Another big feather in this movie's cap is the sheer improvement it makes over Homecoming in terms of spectacle. And of course that involves some trippy and wacky Mysterio-related stuff, but also just the rest of the action as a whole. It's been a long time since we've had Spidey action this good in a live-action movie that wasn't just small bits scattered around a sequence filled with other heroes. Especially depending on how you feel about the majority of the action in the Garfield movies, Far From Home feels like the best Pete's been utilized in a straight-up fight sequence all by his lonesome in years. At this point, I don't know what's Watts and what's the second unit team, but the action and the swinging is so much more creative, tense, and cool than Homecoming, where the lack of that was frankly my biggest tangible issue with the thing. You've heard all about how bloody massive the end credit scenes for this film are, most likely, and I genuinely weep at the idea that it'll be at least a year or more before I see the seeds laid here bear fruit. I need to know what's next for Peter Parker immediately. Even though, by that token, I think this particular mid-credit scene really skirts the line between what should and shouldn't be part of the movie. Loath as we all are to admit it, these mid- and post-credit tags should never feel like required viewing, and I don't know how anyone who just didn't feel like sticking around when the credits rolled this time is going to have any foothold in whatever the next chapter of Spidey's journey is. All in all, Far From Home is something I need to watch again, but also something I want to watch again, which is good. If you liked Homecoming, you'll like this one, though by how much is in the air. If you didn't like Homecoming, you might actually like this one more, but that depends what you're looking for. If a straight-up comedy isn't what you want, you might be thrown by the first half of the film, and if a stark reminder that this is the MCU's world and Spider-Man is just living in it isn't what you want, then you might be thrown by the whole thing, pardon the pun. But when it gets rolling, it has some of the best self-contained bits in any Spidey movie. In general, I recommend it for those who have already decided they're fully on board with the MCU's take on Spidey, or for those who just find they enjoy a Spidey story no matter what. For me, it's somewhere around there with Captain Marvel or Thor Ragnarok, in that I can say with confidence that I like it, but may like it significantly more or less on rewatches. Like and subscribe for more stuff like this, and look forward to another video on this movie once I've seen it a second time, most likely in spoilercast form. Let me know in the comments if you liked the film, or if this review swayed you any particular way if you haven't seen it. Thanks for watching.